And today marks the last day of this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Joining us to give us his thoughts is Alex Newman, award-winning international journalist, author, and president of Liberty Sentinel Media. Alex, good afternoon. It's always great to have you here. So there has been some back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister saying the rules-based order is fading, referencing the U.S. And I just reported then Trump sent an open letter to Carney that his invitation to join the Board of Peace has been rescinded. How are you looking at this situation? How are you reading it?
Well, Mark Carney is really the quintessential globalist. And right before the World Economic Forum started this week in Davos, he made some very cryptic comments about a partnership with the Chinese Communist Party, the most murderous regime that's ever existed in history, saying that this new partnership, positions them well, sets them up well for the new world order. And so I would imagine Trump and his advisors are looking at those kinds of comments and saying, what? I think he has really crossed a line here. He's attacking a historic ally, the United States of America, in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. This goes far beyond even what Justin Trudeau was saying. And if you listen to what he had to say at the World Economic Forum, the old world order is dead. The United States is no longer the leader. He's advocating for a radical transformation in geopolitics that would usher in what he and many other globalists in the past have referred to as a multipolar world order, where the United States would be sidelined as the hegemonic power, and where forces like the CCP, forces like the Kremlin, maybe even forces like Iran would rise to the fore and have a major seat at the table. And I think that would be a disaster, not just for Canadians, not just for Americans, but for the whole world.
So why do you think Canada is doing this? And why do you think it's also moving closer to China in its relationship, which Commerce Secretary Lutnick says undermines Canada's negotiating position with the United States?
Well, I think the reason Carney is doing this is because he is a committed globalist in the truest sense of the term. This is a man who was on the board of the World Economic Forum. This is a man who has led multiple central banks, including the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. He is really the epitome of the elite or elitist establishment, and he doesn't like what the Trump administration is doing. He doesn't like the idea of America first. He doesn't like the United States government withdrawing from dozens of UN organizations. He doesn't like the President of the United States and the American people rebuking the kind of world order that they are trying to build, which, by the way, has much more in common with the CCP system, with the totalitarian system, than it does with historic Canada, historic United States, historic West, what we used to call the free world or Christendom. So I think Carney's really out of line, but I'm almost grateful for this because he's really dropped the mask. And now the whole world, not just Canada, the whole world can now see what will happen if these kinds of people, if these institutions get their way.
Okay, I want to get your thoughts on the broader World Economic Forum other than the Canada situation. Anything else from the WEF that stood out to you? Any takeaways?
Well, we're watching a major tension here, and the dispute between Carney and Trump is kind of representative of that. But we now have a growing contingent of populist forces that do reject the traditional international rules-based order that we heard so much about from more liberal Republicans and, of course, the Democrats for so long. A UN-centric, globalized world with a kind of a global economy, a global political system, et cetera. And it's not just Trump, right? If you listen to, for example, what Javier Milei said, we have to go back to traditional Western values, to Greek philosophy, to Roman law, to Christian biblical values. These are major, powerful world leaders. You have multiple leaders in Europe now who are moving in this direction. So the World Economic Forum traditionally has been kind of a partner of the United Nations. Klaus Schwab used to brag that they helped build up the CCP over 40 years. But that dominance and that worldview that reigned supreme at the World Economic Forum is now being challenged by some of the most powerful people and institutions in the world. And we're seeing these challenges right at the heart of their own little celebration in Davos. So this is really a sea change that we're watching. It remains to be seen how it's all going to end up. But certainly the conflict has now come out into the open, and I think the people of the world will have a very unique opportunity to see what they think suits their values better and move in that direction.
And we've been watching Davos closely here as well, and it looks like Davos moved away from heavy advocacy for climate policy, putting more of an emphasis on AI. And we know, of course, China is a huge proponent of renewable energy, despite being, ranked the worst polluter. So based on what we saw at Davos, would you say that the Chinese Communist Party is losing some influence there?
It's very interesting. I just had an article in the Epoch Times about this situation. I was down in Brazil covering the climate summit just a couple months ago for the New American Magazine. And the piece that I wrote for the Epoch Times was CCP wins the COP30 climate summit. And so the whole climate movement, as Trump said back in 2012, has really been a major benefit to the CCP. They've used this to undermine the West, undermine their competitors, and build up their own economy, ship our productive capacity over there. But now, as you said, with the emergence of AI, a lot of these climate movement profiteers, people like Bill Gates, are realizing, well, hey, we actually need energy to run our data centers and our AI. So I think temporarily with Trump in the White House, he calls this the biggest con job in the history of humanity. They're temporarily letting the emphasis on climate change go, but they will be back with this. They're working very hard. When I was in Brazil, one of the big themes was we've got to reach the next generation. We're going to go into the schools around the world. UNESCO said every country, every school is going to be teaching the climate stuff to the next generation. So I don't think the climate issue is gone, but there's no question that it has taken a backseat. It's on the back burner, at least for the duration of the Trump administration, maybe longer as this AI starts gobbling up more and more energy.
So, Alex, you said earlier that the tensions between Canada and the U.S. is sort of representative to a certain degree of the atmosphere there. What is your assessment of the U.S.'s standing then and the world's perception of the U.S. following President Trump's speech and his actions?
Well, despite what a lot of these globalists would like to believe, the United States remains the single most powerful economy, by far the most powerful military power in the world. And so as much as they don't like it, the United States still remains the powerhouse. Now, I think there's a lot of forces that would like to see that change, a lot of forces that would like to see the CCP kind of step into that role. I think very much including a lot of the globalists like Mark Carney that we've talked about. And this is not a new trend. Since 2017, they've been painting Xi Jinping as kind of the guardian of the world order. It's very troubling to me. But I think this conflict is only going to get worse. It's only going to become more pronounced. And I think the implications for humanity could not be bigger. We're at a crossroads. Are we going to move in the direction of kind of traditional American values as enshrined in our Declaration of Independence, as enshrined in our Constitution, as inherited from previous generations, the United Kingdom and the Magna Carta and Western values, the biblical tradition? Or are we going to move in the direction of kind of a CCP-led world order where humans have no freedoms, humans have no rights, where the government is supreme over everything? That is the choice that humanity is facing now. And for a long time, nobody wanted to talk about it out in the open. That issue is now in the open. It's not going away. And I think the next few years will tell us more about what direction we're going to go in.
Okay, Alex, it's so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.